everybody, it's Robin from Ontario Iguanas. I'm going to do my food video today, so I'm going to talk about supplements as well as what foods you can feed on a daily basis versus some foods that you should just feed on occasion, as well as the iguana pellets. So I'm going to talk about those, and I'm going to show you how I cut up all my foods and how I prepare the salads for my iguanas for a full week. Okay, so this is how I start off. I have everything kind of laid out of what I'm going to use. So the greens that I'm using today, I have collard greens, so I have 3 bunches of those. I have dandelion greens, and I have endive, which is a great source of calcium. So all these greens that I'm feeding this week are regular stable greens. So these greens can be fed daily, and they can be in their diets very consistently. One food chart that I love, that I follow, is from Green Iguana Society. I printed this off online. If you haven't been to this website, check it out. It's a great website that has lots of different information on different problems and solutions with iguanas. This food chart is the most detailed one that I could find online, so it lists everything that an iguana can eat, if it's stable, if it should be fed on occasion, or if they should never eat it, or if it's just not a good choice for them. So for today, I have an acorn squash. I have 1 sweet potato. This is only the couple times I've been using this one. It's kabocha squash, I think is how you pronounce it. I have a spaghetti squash and butternut squash. I'm not going to be cutting them all up for this week. Part of the butternut squash and the sweet potato will be for next week, and I'll explain why I'm using the sweet potato next week a little later on when I cut up those. But this is a great food chart. So for example, the acorn squash, it says it's a stable veggie, good source of fiber, rind should be discarded, cored, and chopped or shredded. So this not only tells you if it's a stable or not, but it also tells you how to cook it or how to prepare it if you aren't sure. So first off, I'm going to cut up my collard greens. And what I basically do, chop off the bottom because I don't need the stems, throw that away. Then what I do with the leaves, because I have iguanas that are different ages, so if you have an adult iguana, sometimes they can eat the stem of it. It is kind of hard, so for my smaller iguanas, I cut them off. So I go through and I cut all the stems off from each piece. And then you're just left with the leaf. So you don't have to worry about them choking on it or getting it stuck in their throat or everything. So that's what I do with all my collards. So I'm going to go ahead and chop everything up, and then I'll come back when I'm cutting up the endive and the dandelion greens. Okay, so that's the collards all cut up, and I will take those over and rinse them. Next we have the endive. Now this has a lot softer stem to it than the collards do, so you can leave a lot more on, because if you were to cut off the stem, you'd be losing a lot of the plant as well. So I just again cut off the bottom, don't need that. And then these stems, they are pretty soft. If you make the salads, you notice there's a little harder piece in, then I cut it out. You can even cut a little more off that. Okay, and then I just chop this up. And again, I will rinse them off after they're all chopped up. And obviously, if you just own 1 iguana, you're not going to be purchasing this many greens at once. I own 5 iguanas, 3 of which are that are all over 3 years. So I buy a lot of greens I go through about 6 bunches of different greens a week, and that's what I feed all of them. So there's the endive. Next, I'm going to cut up the dandelion. Again, with the dandelion, the stem is a lot softer, so you don't need to cut out the stem. And it would take a lot of time if you're going through and cutting the stem out of a dandelion. But if you do find one that's a little harder than normal, cut it out or rip it out or whatever you have to do. I like to chop this up a little finer for my adults because of the stems that I leave in. So I'm going to chop that up just like that. Dandelion. I find it a lot better to prepare salads for a full week. I used to prepare them by day, and it would just take me so long each day to cut them up, and I wouldn't use enough greens, or I was using too much. So I find it a lot easier when I make it for a full week. It's a lot more time efficient, especially if you have multiple iguanas. So I'm going to take these over, I'm going to rinse them, and I'll come back. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to cutting up the vegetables and fruits and stuff for this week. So I have spaghetti squash, butternut squash, and acorn squash that I'm going to use for this week. The kabocha squash I'm going to save for next week just because I have quite a bit already that I'm cutting up. And the sweet potato, I'll tell you the reason I'm waiting to use this. Right now I feed my baby iguanas the pellets, the pellet diet for iguanas. They get that, and since the main ingredient is corn. Corn is very high in phosphorus as well as sweet potatoes. So you shouldn't want to feed too many things that are high in phosphorus together, because you're supposed to have a 2-to-1 ratio, so you're supposed to have more calcium than you are phosphorus. So you don't want too many high phosphorus foods in a single salad or all at once. So I'm going to save this to next week when they don't get pellets. I take them on and off them. That way I make sure that they are going to eat their salads. I've had iguanas eating pellets and they refuse to eat salad because they like the pellets more. So that's something you just need to keep an eye on, is that your iguana is actually still going to eat the salads if they're on pellets, because they tend to really like them. So I'm going to cut up the spaghetti squash first, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I don't cook it, I don't heat it up at all. I just cut it up and they eat it raw. Cut both ends off and then slice it in half. Okay, take a spoon and you're just going to carve out the inside, because they don't need the guts or the seeds of the squashes. So you're going to do that with every squash. You're going to take out the guts from it. So that's what it looks like after. And if you haven't eaten spaghetti squash yourself, I recommend eating it. I started cooking it a while ago and it is phenomenal. It's delicious. So if you haven't tried it, look up a recipe on how to cook it for yourself and give it a shot, because it's really tasty. Okay, so now that I have that done, I'm going to cut it again. So technically it's going to be cut into quarters. I stand it on its end, and then it's really easy to peel it. And I do this basically for all my squashes. It's a lot easier. I used to cut it up in pieces and then cut the peel off after, and it was just so tedious. Now that I have it cut up, I'm just going to slice it down. And then it makes it fairly easy to chop up into smaller pieces. Again, depending on how old or how big your iguana is, you're going to want to cut the pieces accordingly. So this is the size I cut them up for my adults and juveniles. And then again, I will save some for after that I will cut up smaller for my babies. I'm going to go ahead and cut all this up. It's the fastest way, it's the easiest way. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this up, and I'll come back for the acorn squash. Okay, so there is the butternut squash all cut up. And then I'm going to do the same with the acorn squash. There's the acorn squash all cut up. Okay, so now I'm going to go get my containers. I'm going to show you what I put them in for the whole week. Okay, so these are the containers that I use. I just got them at the dollar store. I find them awesome. It's a great way to make salads. It's a good idea to have salads prepped if you're going away and you have someone looking after your iguana, so it allows that person to make sure that they're getting their proper foods. So I'm just separating them into, I have them named, so I'm just separating them for the proper people, or proper iguanas. Yeah, so I have Sassy, Phoenix, Billy, and then Molly and Pip get separate ones. This will last them a whole week when I fill it right up. Okay, so what I do first, Molly and Pips, because it's just the two of them, I have to cut it up a little finer. I fill both of their containers first with the greens. That way I make sure that I leave enough left over. There's one. Okay, so I have both those ready to go. I'm going to put some of each of the squashes in there as well, so I make sure that I have lots left over. And then I will cut that up finer after I'm done everything else. It takes me about an hour to prepare all this. Normally every Sunday I do it, and that takes out a lot of time from the week versus probably about half an hour to do all this each day throughout the week. So it takes up an hour of my time on my Sundays, but then it saves me a lot of time and hassle throughout the week. So it's always good to be prepared too, especially if you're in a hurry, you don't have time to feed them, then you just have to grab a container and throw it in there. So it's a lot faster than what you would normally do. Okay, so there's all the greens. Throw those over there, and then I'm going to put in the squashes. Okay, so basically that's it. I've cut up everything. So this is 6 days worth of salads for all 5 of my iguanas, and then all I have to do now is just cut up Molly and Pips into smaller portions and smaller chunks. So that's how I make my salads. Again, go to Green Iguana Society and check out their food chart. You can find other charts online as well. I find that one's the best. Just check it out and try different things and make sure you're feeding the proper diet to your iguana so they can get proper nutrients. So if you have any questions, you can ask me on my Facebook page, Ontario Iguanas, or on Instagram at hashtag Ontario Iguanas as well. Okay, so that's how I make my salads for my iguanas for an entire week. Now I'm just going to cover some of the supplements and the pellets that I feed my iguanas. So my baby iguanas, Molly and Pip, get juvenile pellets every day. So they always have them in their cage. They can eat it kind of whenever. And then they get a salad every day as well. Now, when I talked earlier about the potato, the sweet potato that I normally don't put in the salads, they never get sweet potato because of how many pellets that they eat. So because they're high in phosphorus, I don't feed them a lot of other options that have high phosphorus. So that's always something to be cautious about. If you're feeding pellets, make sure that the diet you're giving your iguana in the salads is low in phosphorus. That way they're not getting too much phosphorus for the amount of calcium that they're getting. And talking about calcium, this is the calcium that we just purchased, Flicker's calcium. It is with vitamin D3. I buy vitamin D3 in my calcium because my iguanas don't go outside because I live in Canada right now. It's winter, it's raining outside, so they can't go outside. If you are living down south in the warmer climate and your iguana has access to natural sunlight, take them out in the natural sunlight. They will get vitamin D3 that way, as well as from their UV light. So if you have a good stable diet and you have proper UV lighting or sun rays, which are best for your iguana, you don't really need vitamin D3. My adults and my juveniles get calcium every other day, just a little bit on their salad. I don't give them a lot, so they get calcium every other day. My babies, so Molly and Pip, get calcium every day on their salads. So just because of the rate of how much they grow. So that being said, adults, I don't give calcium every day because I have a good diet that I feed them, as well as they all have proper lighting. They do go outside in the summertime. But it is winter time, so I do give them a little bit less calcium in the summer if they're going outside regularly. And then just be careful if you're feeding the pellets daily, which it does recommend. It doesn't say anything about the high phosphorus in it, but if you are feeding it, make sure you have a diet that is extremely high in calcium and you're giving a calcium supplement with your salads. So yeah, that's basically all I need to talk about with food. If you guys have any other questions in regards to salads, or if you have a type of food that you're wondering if they can eat, you can ask me as well. So I make my salads every Sunday normally, and if you guys follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen pictures of the amount of salads that I make and the amount of greens that my iguanas go through. So feed your iguana a good diet. It makes all the difference, as well as proper lighting, and you should have a happy and healthy iguana. And I will see you guys next week.